Just want to welcome everybody to Empire Builders. Today, we have my good friend, Bob Castellini, and his story is awesome, and I'm excited to spend some time with you today, Bob. So here's
Morning,
a little
Rick.
bit of morning. Here's a little bit about Bob. He began his career, he began his work as a financial advisor after experiencing a roller coaster of successes and failures that his family saw through his life. Your grandfather founded a large corporation, a public corporation, became CEO of a large fruit company, and died almost penniless as a result of poor financial decisions and counsel. And so your mission is to identify the underserved need in today's world for proper stewardship and guidance of wealth in order to prevent others from making poor financial and life decisions. And so, I'll paraphrase a little bit just to say, man, you've got a huge heart of gold, and your interest is absolutely pure and based on, and I can't wait to kind of dig in and unpack a little bit of your story so that others can understand your perspective. But that led you to a career in financial services and helping, family offices and people preserve and perpetuate wealth successfully. You've got obviously you're certified and all the necessary credentials for that position, certified investment management and analyst designation. It's the only credential designed specifically for financial professionals who want to attain an advanced level of competency as an investment consultant. You're also a chartered retirement plan specialist and accredited investment fiduciary, and in your MBA from Babson Graduate School of Business as well. So you've got, you're well documented as highly credentialed. I'm excited for that too. And what I really love in your story too is your heart for helping and serving. You're actively engaged with the Cincinnati Zoo and Botanical Gardens, the Playhouse in the Park, the Anthony Munoz Foundation, Cincinnati Region Business Committee, and the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame Museum. You've also got a beautiful wife, Jen, and two kids, Luke and Alex. I know we must have said this and had this conversation at some point, but you do know I have a Luke and an Alex too. So I'm like, what are the odds of that,
no
right?
Coincidence here.
So we're kindred spirits, and you're a fan of downhill skiing, horseback riding, hella skiing, and an avid hiker, as I know, since we've taken a hike, and you out hiked me, significantly out hiked me. So welcome to the show. Appreciate you being on Empire Builders. And the idea behind Empire Builders, just to remind everybody, is that building empires, there's certainly a financial component to the empire conversation, but I think empires mean leaving a legacy, and it means doing something that matters. And it means really finding the best version of yourself that at some point when your day is done, you can look back and be proud. And so that's the context of the conversation. It's a holistic conversation, and not just, I think making money, although it's a gift and it's a privilege, it's really what you do and how you do that matters most. So Bob, welcome to the show. I'm excited again. And so where did it all begin? Let's just get some backdrop on you growing up. I mean, as a child, what was that like?
Yeah, I grew up in a family of 4 kids. I had a brother, 2 sisters. I was the oldest son. Given my father's first name, different middle name. He didn't want juniors. It just made the world a little more confusing regardless. But I have a younger brother, 2 years younger than me, and an older sister and younger sister. We were all very close, just about a year apart each. And we were born to parents who were married relatively young in their 20s. And my mother was the daughter of a very successful businessman who you had referenced earlier. He actually founded Minute Maid and sold it to Coca-Cola. He then ran what was then known as United Fruit. You would know it today as Chiquita. He actually branded Chiquita. He was a marketer, he was an ideas, and he was a masterful communicator and promoter. And when my dad married my mom, he didn't have 2 pennies to rub together. He was just finishing up his tour at Fort Devens in the Army, and she was a young debutante daughter of a Wall Street uh, CEO who had been on the front page of Newsweek several times, was often quoted in the Wall Street Journal, and he had this little family produce business back home that he had no interest in going back to run. He wanted to go be an investment banker, and he was wrapping up his MBA at Wharton. He got a letter from his grandmother with a call to arms to come back and save the little family business. It was a small wholesale produce concern based out of Cincinnati, a couple of delivery trucks and a handful of employees. In short, he answered the calling, came back, and applied everything he'd learned and learned on the job to trying to save the family farm, if you will, the family produce business. And to condense the story, to him, my mother's father, my grandfather, was just iconic, right? You know, he was one of my dad's heroes in the produce business, and he looked to him as a friend and a mentor. The irony is, they wound up trading places in many regards. My father worked 6.5 days a week. I pretty much spent all my time with him down at the produce warehouses while he was working the phones and building out a horizontally integrated produce business. At that time, produce was basically just commission based, and he wound up acquiring produce, trucking companies, making it horizontally integrated, which basically meant he controlled the whole supply chain from the grower to the end user. And during that time, diversified cash flow into a lot of other businesses, et cetera. So I was constantly around business. My father was always entertaining all of his customers at our home. Our home was like a bed and breakfast. My mom would cook all the family meals for his customers who would stay overnight in our guest house. And I just sat at the table living and learning business. And we had 2 Watts lines, if you remember those, coming into the house. And there was just a constant flurry of business calls and talk. And he was on the phone quite a bit with the West Coast growers. To cut the story to a logical conclusion, my grandfather, when he sold his shares of Minute Maid to Coca-Cola, you can imagine owning Coca-Cola in the early 60s, right about the time Warren Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway were buying. He decided to sell all of his shares and put it into what was then called United Fruit. And the stock did quite well until it fell subject to a hostile takeover. And sadly, my grandfather lost the majority of his wealth. Hence a lesson in concentrated positions. And in his defense, there was a expectation that executives in that time would have all their equity, all their stock in that company. It was restricted, but sadly he was unable to diversify. And he and my grandmother lived into their mid 90s. And I can remember my mother's selling some of the Coke stock that he had given her as a wedding gift, which had grown to a substantial amount. And that was without even reinvesting dividends. And she wound up supporting their living expenses in their last years of life. That was my classroom. That was my education in business.
So then from there, obviously it inspired you to move in the path that you did. Give us a little background around, school and just beyond that, how you cut your teeth.
Yeah, so I'll never forget the mediocrity speeches I would get from my old man, because I was a good student. But when I would start to fall short, I started getting distracted in my teen years. He'd say, you go ahead and bring home those mediocre grades and go to a mediocre college and get a mediocre job and lead a mediocre life. What do you want? I said, you have every advantage. I would say I was definitely born on first base. I had my education paid for, two loving parents and a roof over my head. So I took his words to heart, and got very serious about school. As I was finishing up college, I knew that I wanted to go into business, and wanted to learn more about finance. Finance and accounting are the language of business. I wanted to learn how a banker values a business, how a banker thinks. I think very important to know both when going into business. And so I went to work for a bank, went through the training program, ran a branch, doing lending, running the P&L, and decided that now I wanted to truly learn the language of business. And I had no accounting background. My undergrad was poli-sci at Denison University. Taught me how to think and reason, but didn't teach me how to read a spreadsheet or company's financials. So I applied to Babson, and I was probably one of the youngest students there. In hindsight, waiting a little bit probably would have been a little bit more advantageous. They want you to have a little more experience. But it was 2 incredible years. Half the students there are from all over the world. So I was very challenged there, but they were learning in a second language. And that was inspiring to me. And I learned a great deal about entrepreneurship there. They're known for their entrepreneurial studies and being a self-starter, and came out with a mindset that I didn't want to go into our family produce logistics and distribution business. I wanted to go cut my teeth doing something else, and I'd fallen in love with finance and investing. So I chose that path, and went and got securities licensed, and started out at a small brokerage concern, but thought that was a little too limiting. And it's back in the days of cold calling and working off muni bond lists, which was great experience for me and humbling, but I wanted to be an analyst. So I pursued the CFA track and went to work for a firm that managed, was a boutique asset manager that managed growth strategies, and had a couple of mutual funds, and most of their wealth was private wealth. It was like a small family office, and that opened my eyes to the investment world and the needs of families, especially multi-generational family businesses.
So a couple of questions that you've sort of prompted. One, I guess we'll start with you. What's your general approach to investing? And then if we can kind of evolve into, you've been in the business a while and seen some ups and downs. I mean, there's a lot going on in the current climate and market. I'd love to get your take on where you see things, and if any of your opinions about how to, build and create wealth, what's changed or could change in the near term. But let's start with your general approach. I mean, what's in terms of how you've built wealth and invested and how you advise people. We've got, and just to preface that too, we've got a lot of real estate entrepreneurs on this call who invest a lot of energy in the real estate sector, both in buying rental property, multifamily, but also just serving other people and, living in a commission-based world as self-employed. They're self-employed. They're not, or they create their own LLC, but ultimately they're still the chief everything.
Understood. And so you've got a combination of owners and agents, and it's a term I would use with all my clients. I would tell them you can either be an owner or an agent, and an agent will make a living. An owner will build wealth. You build wealth through equity. And an enterprise, I'll be public or private. And the key is that you know what you own. So a lot of my clients, ironically, came out of real estate world, primarily in the multifamily space, and they knew how to run businesses and generate cash flow. And frankly, they made some of their best returns in real estate. We weren't there to tell them we could outperform what they were doing. We were there to frankly protect their wealth and diversify it. And in short, I've lived now through what will be 4 recessions. And the clients certainly suffered the most, as we all did in 08, 09, and then going back to 2000, 2002. Leverage is a double-edged sword, and a lot of them were highly levered. The banks lended even more generously in those days, and frankly, didn't have as strict a criterion, and it got a lot of folks in trouble. So my mantra with them was to pay themselves first and diversify outside of their core competency and have, if you will, a core base that would contribute substantially to their vertical and horizontal income. So we tend to focus so much on what we do best, and until we get our assets or our money working for us, it's frankly we're living paycheck to paycheck. We're worried about our next sale, our next close. We're worried about our next transaction, and transactional income I always liken to a shark swimming in the water. The shark's got to keep water moving through its gills to survive, and that's what a transactional agent has to do. And it can be very lucrative, but it can also, as we all know, be feast or famine. So that diversification and getting our money working for us, frankly, in other spaces that aren't going to have the same exposure as real estate is important. And frankly, real estate has been a great asset. It's a phenomenal asset.
Right.
I'm to be critical of myself. It's that I didn't do enough early investing in real estate. But without question, we were there to be their steward and to protect them from predators, the tax man, and from themselves. A big part of our job was protecting our clients from themselves.
Gotcha. So diversity does make sense. And for those on the call that aren't familiar with vertical and horizontal, vertical is basically your job. It's your active income, and horizontal represents passive income. And, one thing that we talk about on Empire Builders too is, one, creating a budget to determine what your real living expenses are under, your chosen, circumstances, and to build in a little bit of margin for unknowns and uncertainties. But then the goal is to create enough passive or horizontal income to make sure that you're always above the waterline. Your decision-making chain and the psychology of risk changes when you've got enough passive income to always make the corner in terms of your core bills and your overhead to run your family and lifestyle. What would you say about the psychology of success? And maybe even start with, where have you had challenges or failures and that you've overcome and learned a good lesson relative to that conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. Success is not a number. I made the mistake of thinking success was hitting a certain net worth or number in my life, and I was corrected on that by my father and one of his close friends one night when he was asking what I was aspiring to, and I gave him a number, and that was short-sighted. Obviously, I was young, naive, and I remember my dad looking at me and saying, "Success will never be a number." Frankly, that number could be limiting, and it also, frankly, could force you to think in a way that is short-sighted. And I took that to heart. Success is about, frankly, impacting the lives of others. So how many how many people can I impact in my life? And you can do that a number of different ways. You can go wide or you can go deep. And I said I wanted to go deep. I would be able to make a deep impact by truly focusing, investing my time in a smaller number of clients, but becoming an integral part of their life plan, far beyond their wealth plan. And that actually forced me to rethink the business model, which was at that time just managing money, picking stocks and bonds and building portfolios. And while we expanded to doing more comprehensive wealth plans, I watched successful businessmen when they had liquidity events and big exits from their business or their real estate assets or other investments, take that wealth and diversify it well, and then build a team around them of experts, team of advisors. And they would call it a family office. And that family office handled every aspect of their lives so they could focus, one, on enjoying life, but two, on what their core competency was and what their true focus and interests were. And for many of them, it gave more time to serve their communities. Well, some couldn't afford to have the bricks and mortar and staff of a single family office. You're usually talking about $1 billion in wealth. So there's multi-family offices, which would usually start about 200 million in wealth. But then there was this unserved niche of somewhere between 10 to 200 million. And they had the same needs and they weren't being met. And by that, I mean, helping educate their next gen, putting together not just a wealth plan, but a life plan that was based upon their personal values, helping them build a vivid vision on their life, helping them build family foundations, donor advised funds, helping them build the why around their wealth. A lot of people don't think about it. For them, it's just a number. A lot of people, it's a lifestyle. You start having kids and grandkids, suddenly your why becomes bigger. And building memories becomes a lot more important than building wealth. You know, Rick, I see you doing a great job of both. You've been tremendously successful, but I also see you building memories and having experiences. You send me these great pictures with friends and family. And, you know, you're building a portfolio of indelible memories. And that's frankly what a lot of people miss out on, using their wealth to build a portfolio of intangible experiences.
So how would you advise a 20-something-year-old you before you have wealth, both? And let's go two paths. One is the why and the purpose-built life. And then the other is just strictly, how would you advise your, looking back over your shoulder, starting over from scratch? We've got people on the call that don't have 10 million in assets. But, as I've witnessed, wealth building is, I don't remember, maybe it was a Hemingway quote, slowly then suddenly, about going bankrupt. And it might've been from one of his books. I believe it was, as a quote. And it's like nothing happens fast. And then it happens all of a sudden. You look over your shoulder after chopping wood long enough and you've acquired, not only assets and opportunity and income, but also experiences. So how would you advise yourself at 22? What lesson or perspective would you share for somebody, who's owns their primary residence, has a good job, makes a couple $100,000 a year? What would you do to magnify, or what advice would you give a young you?
I would give anything to go back and tell my younger self the power of time. Your greatest asset is time. And we've all heard, if you will, of the theory of compounding. Right. And Einstein himself said it was frankly, one of the greatest phenomenons in human history. Simple exercise. I shared this at Champions, Rick. Someone told me when I was a young guy out at the warehouse, and he put a pad in front of me and and a calculator said, I want you to start with a penny. I want you to double it every day. I want you to write down the number for each day. And I want you to tell me where you are after 30 days. It's simple exercise, a great one to do with your kids. You learn the power of compounding. Over 3 days, you're looking at a 7-figure number. And it's those last 2 doubles that change everything. The first, to your point, you're chopping wood, those first few doubles are meaningless in theory. And you start getting down to day 28, 29, 30, it's meaningful, and suddenly you're over $1 million. So pay yourself first is what I would say. And by that, I mean, make it easy for yourself. Pay yourself in a way that you don't even see it. If you're an independent agent and you're setting up your own SEP IRA, you're setting up an IRA, or you have a simple IRA plan, you have a 401k through a larger entity, pay yourself first. If you're with a larger organization that has a match, that's free money. Don't just give up to the match level though. Put in the maximum amount that you can without compromising your needs. It's okay to compromise your wants early on, but don't compromise your needs. So obviously we need food, clothing, shelter, the basics. What I would do is I would reward myself by hitting certain new bogeys, by giving myself a few wants, but don't ever compromise paying yourself first. And for me, everyone's different. For me, that was 20 to 25% of my gross annual income. And if it came out before I saw it, well, then it was in a different bucket and it was working for me, and it's growing tax deferred. And in my case, I had a match in all of my corporate 401k plans. Up to 3-4% was being matched at 100%. That's 100% return. So a match is a no-brainer. But beyond that, our beloved IRS allows us to put away a good sum of money. Now, I'm over 50, so I can put away over 18 grand a year into a 401k. Compound over time at a conservative rate of return. Let's just choose 7%, okay? And there's a real simple calculation. It's called the rule of 72. Some of you may have heard it. It's a rough estimate. It's a simple calculation. Take any rate of return and divide it into the number 72. So you divide 72 by 7, gives you a little over 10 years. That means I'm going to double that money in about 10 years at an average rate of return of 7%. And again, these are theoretical numbers, but the law of compounding, if you start investing your money right out of school, whether that's 18 or 22, you have set yourself up for success. We would do an exercise with folks who were just starting to save. We had a lot of 401k plans, and we would go and do education for the participants. And frankly, some of them were real estate agents, and a lot of them were owners. And they were trying to understand, if you will, why they needed to start now. They were focused on all the other things they needed in their life. And understandably, some were getting married and had houses and mortgages, et cetera. But I showed them what I called the Latte Factor. So a latte at Starbucks or a beer at a bar is about $5, give or take. And if you put $5 away every day from the time you're 22 to age 32, you're going to come out and get roughly, and this was the interesting part. And then you stopped at age 32. So you save for those first 10 years. This was to really drive home the timing piece, getting in early. That money would grow to just under $1 million. If you kept contributing, which obviously is the idea, you'd be retiring with several $1 million. And people suddenly hit the pause button. So chopping wood, Rick, $5 a day. Doesn't sound like much. We don't think anything of it when we're at the gas station or we're at Starbucks.
Wow. Yeah, that's crazy. So what I hear you saying, one is start early. So, but the interesting thing you also said was that even if you don't start it, your calculation was a 10-year run, and then you just let it coast on its own momentum. And so even if you're 32 or 42, my guess is, and man, I hope I'm right, that modern medicine kind of catches up with most of us who are still young enough to hopefully outlive science or some of the current strategies. And, the longevity could be 90, 100, 110. So I don't care where you are, it may or may not be too late for you to start taking advantage of compounding. And the other half of it is a forced saving strategy so that you never miss it. And I've been blessed with that as a plan my whole life. I just always figured if I saw it, I might, everyone falls prey to an emotional decision to purchase something irrational or a consumable or something fun. But if that money disappears long before the decision-making chain around those extras or the non-necessities, as you said it, man, you're virtually guaranteed a positive outcome. And so thanks for sharing that. And, my feeling around, given that this conversation, a lot of real estate professionals and people in the lending world and in our, ancillary world are probably going to hear about or watch this show. One, start with your core genius and maximize your vertical and your active income and make sure you're taking advantage of, efficiency and effectiveness relative to what you're good at. And then parlay that into investments that align with what you already know. And then the last piece of it is invest in hire professionals who are really good at helping you diversify successfully. Did I miss anything in the kind of the thinking chain of kind of echoing across the board with your story?
Oh, did beautiful job. I think the sooner you figure out your why, the better. When I was asked recently what motivated me to grow and build out my wealth, it had to go beyond my needs, and even those of my family. Those were, of course, paramount. But I had a underlying why in that I wanted to make a significant impact in certain areas that I was passionate about in my community. And when I made some big commitments during capital campaigns and some significant annual campaigns and tried to give some big leadership gifts, I didn't have all that money. They were 5-year pledges, and it lit a very good fire under me and made me aspire to do more. But in order to ask others to give of their time, talent, and treasury, you got to do the same. And a community, frankly, isn't vibrant or vital, and it's certainly not one that people strive to live in unless its citizens are serving it. And I can give you so many examples of communities that have a very civic-minded focus, and others where you've got, frankly, a lot of people are just focused on number one. And the civic-minded communities are the ones that thrive and attract other people to live in them, and have incredible school systems, strong values, and a lot of attractive venues, and are, frankly, beautiful places to live. The people commit their time, talent, and treasury to them. Serve the community that serves you. Whatever community you're living in, you've got current and future clients there, and they're serving your family. And frankly, by serving your community and having visibility and doing that in a genuine way, people take notice and appreciate that you care enough about their community and you're not asking anything in return. Frankly, it was not my intent, but it gave me I met a lot of people, gave me a lot of visibility. There was a lot of cross connectivity, and people would take my calls because I was very visible and active in the community.
It's amazing. Obviously, you come from contribution with a heart for service. The right people notice, and the right people gravitate and are magnetized to that. You also mentioned, 5-year commitments, and I'm about to publish a book, and really the premise is that people overestimate a year and underestimate 5. And where life, I think, it's really good is when you stay the course long enough to feel a compounding effect of just life decisions, and those don't happen in a day, a week, a month, or even a year often. And so, how cool of you to again commit to financial contribution 5 years out that you didn't have, knowing that if you just did the right thing long enough, you'd get there. And I just wanted to applaud that.
No, good examples were set for me by family and role models that I was blessed to have. I always sought out mentors, Rick, and I would schedule breakfasts with them 6 months in advance, and the consistency was so important. I'd always do breakfast or coffee because it wasn't disrupting their day. They were rarely canceled, and frankly, people do their best thinking and are most clear minded in the morning. You meet someone for lunch or later in the day, their head is swimming with thoughts and distractions, and in many cases they're gonna have to cancel because their day's gotten away from them. But the morning was important, and I handpicked my mentors. There's people I aspired to emulate, both as civic leaders and business leaders, and frankly people that I admire with good values, and I stayed in front of them. I wasn't trying to make them clients. They truly just sought out an agnostic mentorship, and that made a big difference. I was blessed to have good role models with my family, but I sought out a number that were outside the family. One was the former CEO and chairman of Procter & Gamble, and it was an honor to meet him. We would meet quarterly. We had ironically shared the same alma mater, the same high school, but a 1 hour lunch, a 1 hour breakfast, forgive me, would sometimes turn into 2 hours. That was the greatest classroom I could have asked for. And there were others like him, but seek out mentors and find them young. And you know what? Successful people like to mentor others. That's the greatest gift. You can't put a price on it. You can't.
Right.
I know, Rick, you've mentored a lot of folks who work with you, for you, and also in your community. And I know you enjoy doing it. That's why you have this podcast. So God bless you for it.
Well, thanks. That's thoughtful. And I do. I mean, and the funny thing is, the more you give, the more you get. It's the law of reciprocity. It's alive and well. It's not just a thoughtful consideration. It's a law for a reason. It happens every time. What can you think about another mentor or role model that's played a significant role in your life and perspective, and maybe a lesson learned or something you took forward?
Absolutely. They say in order to keep something, you've got to give it away. So the first mentor I sought out in my life was my sponsor and a 12-step program. And I share this where it can help others, because there's no shame in it. It saved my life. I'm 32 years sober, and I've been in AA, and my sponsor is still my sponsor to this day. And I sought him out, and he and I have remained close friends. And he was that sounding board, that role model. He's a very successful attorney, and very active in the community. And he actually retired from law, stepped down. He was a senior named partner in his law firm, and went and ran a nonprofit in the last 15 years of his life, and just had deep admiration for him. And frankly, taught me a lot about family, values, manage my own life, and sorting through, frankly, and letting go of a lot of my baggage. Resentments can hold you back in life. It's negative energy. And I had to learn to create 2 columns, gain or drain. Does this thought give me gains in life, or is it draining me? Does this person do I gain insight, love, inspiration, energy from this person, or is this person a drain? Do I need to bless and release this person? I had a hard time doing that.
Yeah.
And I learned a lot from that mentor, and I still do.
Man, that's amazing. Thanks for the transparency, because I don't care who you are and how successful you are on the outside. We've all got inner turmoil and opportunities to, resurrect hurt feelings and perspectives and debilitating experiences that we kind of drag along like an anchor. And, there's no flaw in, suffering long enough to recognize and honor those debilitating things for what they are. But the flaw is that if you carry it a day longer than you need to, it's impacting the better version of yourself that's dying to get out. So thanks for that. And often it is a person and a circumstance that helps create both the awareness and the cure, or at least the step towards a cure. So awesome example. And thanks for that. And I love the idea of a list, and, go through we've heard it said many times that we're the average of the, 4 or 5 people we spend the most time with. But, what circumstances, businesses, anything it's in your day planner and in your life that's, gain or drain, and maximize the gains and minimize, the things that are draining and creating distraction from that better version. And man, that's beautiful. That's awesome. So let's see, let's migrate a little bit. I know you're a family man personally, so you don't climb to the top of your field without putting in some hard work, carrying the bag and doing the work. How do you, at this point in life, what reflective perspective, if you will, or habits or strategies help you create better work-life balance?
Yeah. First word I'd use is boundaries, and I didn't set enough of them. Boundaries around your time, and boundaries around your priorities. And when I was singularly focused on building a successful practice, I lived on my cell phone. That thing was practically duct taped to my ear. And I didn't know how to put it away. And when I crossed the threshold of the door of my home, I did not learn the valuable lesson that phone needed to be, frankly, turned off. And my focus needed to be upon my 2 boys. My wife and kids needed my focus and attention too. And my job as a father and a husband, are frankly far more important than my job as a professional. And I had a rude awakening when one Christmas my kids sent me a message, and it was tongue in cheek, but I heard it loud and clear. They gave me a cell phone lockbox that you put on the kitchen table, and it looked like a little jail cell, and you put your phone in it and they would lock it. And the message was clear: Dad, we want you to be in the moment, not at the moment, and we want you to be with us. And Dad, you don't listen to us. Your mind's always somewhere else when we're together. And they were right about all the above. And fortunately, I did listen. Not right away, but I did. And I had to train myself to turn my phone off. And I mean off, before I walked into the house. So when I was in the garage finishing a phone conversation, I would intentionally not walk in the house so that conversation was over. And I would tell them, look, I'm here to be with my family, and we're going to have to finish this tomorrow. And I set boundaries. And that's important too, because you know what? Rome wasn't built in a day. Those problems or challenges or opportunities were still going to be there tomorrow. And as long as I'd gotten back to anyone who'd reached out to me that day, that was rule number one. I had to return every call or outreach from everybody that day, as long as that call came within a reasonable time frame. If I was due to be at home at 6 o'clock and that call came at 5:59, guess what? I was going to have to ask that person if I could talk to him tomorrow. If I didn't make my family a priority, then frankly, I wasn't going to know them. And, do we work to live or live to work? And that was a valuable lesson for me. I'm grateful to my kids for doing that.
Oh man, that's a beautiful story. I had a similar experience where I was pacing around the island of our house, with a phone stuck to my head, trying to wrap a call up, and raced home to pretend to, be present at, it might've been 6:30 or 7, but I think my oldest was probably three and a half. And I looked over and he's got his hand to his ear doing laps around the breakfast room table, imitating me. And I just remember having that aha moment. I'm like, I look like an idiot. Like, that's not the role model I want to be when I come home. And so it really was an eye opener. And to your point and credit, we had the same aha moment where at that point, I'm like, I will finish calls in the driveway before I cross the threshold. And, every now and then the kids would hear the car and I'd see them peeking out the window, staring at me. And I'm just like, but then when I was in, and it's quality over quantity too. And man, I love what you said, be in the moment, not at the moment. I don't think I've ever heard it said quite like that. And we give ourselves credit for being at moments probably more often than we should. And that goes back to, listening skills and being present and asking better questions. And this works with clients too, because I even remember being on client calls where I would be distracted with texts and other calls. And when you're there, be in the moment. They know when they're a priority, and your family obviously should be the highest priority, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be that wealthy, bitter, lonely, sad person, right? And that happens.
Your kids are going to be able to make choices when they're adults. And I want them to freely and willingly choose to spend time with me. And I want to know their kids. And, the command performances go away, frankly, after they're no longer under your roof. And that's when you find out what kind of relationship you have with them. And if they are seeking you out for advice, drop everything you're doing, give it to them. I remember my dad doing that for me. He could hear in my voice, and he was the busiest guy I knew. He never had much time on the phone, but he knew if I needed to talk to him about something. And I remember saying, Dad, I'm struggling with some direction right now in my life. And he could hear it in my voice. He could have waited. Hey, let's talk about it tonight. So why don't you come on down to my office? And I was young and right out of college. I'll never forget. He rescheduled everything else he had, and he spent a couple hours with me. Just kind of helping me drill down. You don't forget those moments in life. And look, our greatest asset is our time. Who are we going to spend it with? Quality time with quality people, right? Mm-hmm. And I want my family to always be at the top of the list. And if that quality time isn't being spent with them, I need to ask myself why, and where my relationship is with them, and why is my relationship that way, and be curious about it. Be honest. I had someone say to me, name, claim, and don't blame. So if you're having a challenge with somebody, there's an issue between you and another person, name the issue, claim your responsibility, your role in it, and don't blame anyone else. And that kind of self-awareness and introspection has taken me further than anything else. I've learned more from my mistakes and learned how to own them and atone for them, and then build from there. Because that's all. Look, this I don't know when the clock's going to run out. But if I'm not learning every day, and frankly, learning from a lot of my short-sighted mistakes, then I'm not growing.
Awesome. Appreciate that share. How about, since we've got about 7 or so minutes left, given your circle and sphere and your expertise, we're on the front of some interesting economic times, maybe, with inflation, interest rates, consumer confidence, debt. I mean, can you give us as brief as possible, but also where do you see us going and how long are we going there?
Well, your timing's great. I'm here at an economic summit called the Rocky Mountain Economic Summit. And ironically, I'm moderating a 1-hour session on longevity. So let me speak to both because they correlate. First and foremost, there's a number of very renowned economists here. There's certainly some of the finest minds on Wall Street that are all gathered here for 2 days. There's about 200 folks here. And I heard from probably 12 economists yesterday. And the consensus was as follows. If we're not already in a recession, and there was some debate about that, and we certainly heard from a number of the Global Investment Committee members, as well as Fed, a couple of regional Fed chairs, okay? But the consensus is as follows. If we head into a recession, if we're not already in one, it'll be by year end and would likely and logically wrap up by the end of 23. So relatively short-lived, as most recessions are. The average recession is like 9 to 12 months. 15 would be long for a recession, and the average market expansion is 3 or 4 times longer than a recession, and they are necessary. I want you to think and celebrate a recession as a way that the market corrects for excesses. We are seeing inflation now at 40-year highs. And yet we're seeing unemployment at record lows right now. A lot of jobs wanted signs. A lot of you can't find people to come work for you. And there's a reason for that. So we're experiencing stagflation. Stagflation simply is a period of time with slow growth and high inflation. So our GDP numbers, while still positive in the low single digits, are coming down, and yet inflation has gone up. And we just got some disappointing numbers in inflation, over 9%. And the Fed was quick to respond that much higher than they had expected. They were expecting it to go down. So you're going to see the Fed get aggressive in raising rates, probably another 75 basis points, could be a point. Some think the Fed may be chasing inflation at this point. Some think the Fed were late, and maybe they were by 6 months or so. But we just went through a very unprecedented time. And the fact that we're all sitting here healthy, upright, having gone through a pandemic, the likes of which we'd never seen, which had no solution, and came up with a solution, and we're able to now start to get our lives back together, and for our government to step in and frankly take an unprecedented risk in printing money to sustain the economy temporarily. So a democratic socialist approach was taken temporarily to support a capitalist system. We're now letting the capitalist reins of fiscal and monetary policy decouple, right? But for a period of time, fiscal and monetary policy were merged, and it was very unusual. So what next? Well, the Fed's going to work very hard to bring down inflation by using, if you will, the levers it has, and it takes time, chopping wood, right? And you're going to see demand drop off, and hopefully you're also going to see the price of commodities fall further, and hopefully we'll see wage growth stabilize, because it's not healthy. Stagflation is not a healthy place to be. So any kind of recession or correction is very healthy. It clears out the deadwood and hopefully restores some level of stability in the economy. This isn't sustainable. I want you to think about a forest fire. Forest fire basically is a natural occurrence. Lightning strikes and a fire starts in a forest, and we used to put them all out in Yellowstone. And you may remember, and about 30 years ago, there was a fire that burned in Yellowstone, the likes which we'd never seen. It burned so hot and so long, and they couldn't put it out. And finally, they finally had to let it put itself out. And all the smoke jumpers and thousands of folks were able to save some structures and buildings, but the fire burned hot and long and heavy. Why? Because they've been putting out the fires for decades. So all this dry underbrush built up. Well, I want you to think of an economy the same way. If you keep pumping money into the money supply, or if you let an economy expand too much, then you're going to have, if you will, a pretty big correction, a pretty deep recession like we experienced in 08, 09. We can't let something like that happen again. So you do need a healthy correction. This is natural, this is cyclical, this is healthy, and hopefully helps restore some stability in wages, prices, and we return to more normalized growth. So this has been a very unusual time. We're all blessed to have lived through it. And yet we also suffered some losses. There isn't anyone I know who didn't lose someone they knew or knew of to this terrible pandemic. And longevity is certainly something that is going to play into this. To your point, Rick, modern science is now finding a way to help us live longer. And in our lifetime, we could live 10, 20, 30 years longer than our predecessors. Want to be financially prepared for it, but two, hopefully it'll help us build resistance to future pandemics. And with that, I'll close. I know our time is up.
Yeah, we're close. And if you've got a couple minutes, I'd like to just recap some of the genius that was shared, that, wisdom from a life well lived and experienced. So first off, just thank you again for coming on. And I know it's really, really early and you've got a big show today, and to put me in line and in front of that line really means the world. And I feel indebted and grateful to have you as a friend. But here's a couple things. Make sure that you're finding great mentors and role models, and both think civic and business. I thought that was brilliant too. It's not all about what you get, it's what you give. Come from contribution. And you were saying, breakfasts are great. So just keep that in mind, because you don't interfere with the chaos that's always coming in the lives of somebody who's really, truly influential. They're taming, tigers and lions every day too. You don't reach the top without a little bit of chaos. So first is better. 6 months out even. List, create a gain and drain list. I think that's brilliant. Who and what in your world is slowing you down from that ultimate best experience life has to offer, and for the people that you love. A 5-year plan, stick a flag in the ground 5 years out and chase that versus just trying to get to the end of the day. We talked a little bit about forced savings, and and some strategies around that, and the power of compounding. I think that's brilliant, and it's never too late till it is. Who over what equals a big why. I wrote that down. I don't know if it was said exactly like that, but you implied and said it in a story you told. Agents make a living, owners build wealth. So how can you diversify and continue to invest in ways that creates an ownership interest in a spinoff or a ROI on your capital, and move away from consumerism and more towards investment and investment mindset? We talked a little bit about horizontal versus active income, and then be in the moment, not at the moment. I think that might have hit me as hard as anything that you said today. And as simple as it sounds, it's not easy. But what a gift it is when you are to yourself and to the people in your world. A life plan plus a wealth plan equals a successful holistic plan. So, wow, that was a lot, Bob. Any final thoughts? Favorite author, somebody you're listening to, paying attention to, appreciate? Podcast, a resource for self-development?
I'm grateful for the opportunity to share. And, these aren't original thoughts. These are life lessons, many of which I learned from others, or just frankly from my own mistakes. The life plan piece, Rick, is best implemented through a visualization process. There's a book by Cameron Herold called Vivid Vision. And it's a short read, but it takes you through a process of visualizing yourself, your life in present tense, but pushing out 3-5 years from now. And when you take yourself through it, and then your team or your business through it, it's powerful. And then the implementation portion of it is written in a sequel called The Double Double, Cameron Herold. Who Not How, written by Ben Hardy and Dan Sullivan. It's all Dan Sullivan's principles and concepts, eloquently written by a psychologist named Ben Hardy, both of whom I consider friends, especially Ben. Their thought process is delivered succinctly. We often get overwhelmed and can't overcome the idea of achieving something significant because we get too caught up in the how, rather than thinking about who we are going to align ourselves with, hire, subscribe, or partner with to accomplish that. If I stick with what I'm best at, and I surround myself with who's who are far better than me with complementary skill sets to accomplish a greater goal, I'll get there. If I focus on the how, I'm stuck. And then the final book is Gain, The Gain and the Gap. Same two authors, Ben Hardy, Dan Sullivan. We often focus too much upon what we haven't achieved in life. And we measure ourselves to our greatest aspirations. And so we're constantly looking at this gap between where we are and where we think we should be, rather than reflecting upon the journey and all the successes that we've had to get to where we are today. If we reframe our mindset to celebrating the gains in life, we'll gradually close that gap. And it's great to have lofty goals and aspire to them, but let's celebrate the successes along the way.
Man, that's beautiful. Bob, it's been just a sincere pleasure. And again, I appreciate you as a human being and also a thought leader. And just want to, again, shower you with gratitude. So I appreciate our time today together. And I know our folks are going to really, really, really benefit from our conversation. So thank you much.
No, I'm honored, Rick. Thank you. God bless.
You got it, my man. Have a beautiful day and good luck at the summit.
Thank you, my friend. We'll see you soon.
You got it, brother. Bye-bye.